Hello and welcome to Computer Science Dose. In this video, I'm going to ask ChatGPT to teach me Java from scratch. Let's get started. I'm going to begin by asking it the following question. I'm interested in learning Java basics over the next few hours. I would like you to guide me, it's a typo, second language. I'd like you to guide me through the process by creating an hourly plan in the style of a Java textbook that might be called Learn Java over the next few hours. Let's see what it's going to say. And it's finished. So it's saying it's happy to help. It's created an hour by hour plan for 5 hours to learn the basics of Java. So hour 1, it's an introduction to Java. The second hour is about control statements and loops if your application has to make a decision based on a condition, or if it has to iterate a few times to solve a particular problem, then that's hour 2. Hour 3 is about object-oriented programming, or OOP, and the concepts behind it. That's a technique in programming or a paradigm that is implemented in the Java language and several other languages. Arrays and strings. An array would be a bunch of elements, and they are relevant to each other, and they are stored within one container. So for instance, the students of a certain class can be stored in an array of students. Strings are basically text, just like the text you're seeing here. That's a string. Exception handling. If your program is expecting something to go wrong, say you're trying to download a file, and sometimes the file is downloaded, sometimes the file fails to download for a network issue, a back-end server issue, then that's an exception. That's one example of exceptions. So how would you write a program that would be able to download a file if you expect at a certain situation the file download could be interrupted? So that's an exception to the flow that you anticipate. And how would you handle that exception? Well, you might be able to throw an error message to the user of your program saying, oh, by the way, something happened and you were trying to download this file, but the file couldn't be downloaded for this or that reason. So that's exception handling. So this sounds like a very interesting plan, and I think it might just work. So let's keep asking it about the plan. Let's ask it questions about, say, hour 1. Can you write that book chapter? So it's done generating the chapter. Let's have a look. It's Introduction to Java. Java is a high-level object-oriented programming language developed by Sun Microsystems, now owned by Oracle Corporation. Java was first released in 1995, so it's just a bit of history about the Java language. And it has since become one of the most popular programming languages in the world. Java is used to develop a wide range of applications, including desktop, mobile applications. Did you know that Java was, up until recently, the main programming language used to develop Android applications? And now that language is Kotlin, which is based off Java as well. Java is used to develop a wide range of applications, including desktop, mobile applications, web applications, games. Java is used extensively in server-side programming, such as creating web services and managing databases. If you want to learn more about that, probably look up the Spring framework. It's a framework that I personally use to deliver my daily assignments as a software engineer. I'm just going to start a text editor instance here, and just to avoid scrolling, because I see we're going to be asking questions back and forth. So I'm just going to copy this outline here. I'm going to paste it and pages. So instead of scrolling up and asking for the next chapter, or the next topic, we're going to just have it here handy in pages. All right, so I've had the idea of splitting the screen into the original thread that we have and a new thread where we're going to basically ask it all the follow-up questions that we have, just to keep this one here the original one, just nice and clean. So let's continue. So I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions about Java. Please keep in mind, I'm an absolute beginner. So let's go back here. In this chapter, we'll cover the following topics. You've got the Java environment setup repeated in 1 and 4. I guess 4 is just a mistake. So 1, Java environment setup. 2, writing your first Java program, and then the basic syntax of your first Java program. All right, before we can start writing Java programs, we need to set up our Java environments. This includes installing the Java Development Kit and Integrated Development Environment IDE. Let's ask it here. What is Java Development Kit? Java Development Kit is a software development kit used to develop Java applications. It includes a set of tools that developers use to create, test, debug Java programs. The JDK is a bundle of software components that includes the Java Runtime Environment, JRE, and the Java Compiler, and various other development tools, libraries, and utilities. What is the JRE? The JRE is the component that enables Java programs to run on a computer. Okay, think of it as if the Java program is a CD and you have a CD player that runs your CD, executes your CD. So the CD has a bunch of music, and when you put it in the CD player, you can execute the music, you can hear the music, you can play the music, whatever you want to say. And it's the same idea. I could write a Java program, and that would be the CD, and I would give it to you. Now, if you have the JRE, if you have the player of that program, you can just simply execute the program. If you don't have the player, then you're going to have to go and get the player installed on your computer. Then you can then you can execute the program. So the JRE is the component that enables the Java programs to run on a computer, while the Java compiler is used to convert Java source code into bytecode. Think of it as the Java source code is the music. So when you come up with music, that's your source code. And then when you compile it into a format that is understood by the JRE, you're burning that music into a CD-ROM. I know, outdated analogy, I'm sorry, but this is just the best I could think of for the moment. So you'll need a burner, and the burner is the Java compiler. So you need a burner to burn music to CDs. You need a compiler to transform your source code into bytecode. So for the environment part, it's basically a compiler and an execution platform, the JRE, where you can take your compiled program and execute it and see the result. The other part would be the integrated development environment, or the IDE. The IDE, I've asked it here, what is an IDE? An IDE is a software application that provides comprehensive development environment for software developers. Now, I'm not gonna waste much time looking at that answer. I'm just gonna go ahead and show you IntelliJ. You can go ahead and download it. Select your operating system, whichever one you are using. I'm using Mac, and select an installer for Intel or Apple Silicon. Ultimate would be the one requiring a license. The community edition would be free, I guess. So if you don't have a license, go with the free one. I do have it installed, so I'm not going to install it. It's right here. And then you can go and create a new project, copy this name, hello world, and paste it in both places, here and here. All right. This would be the location on your disk where it's going to be created, the project. And the language we're choosing is Java. The build system doesn't matter. And the JDK part is what we've been talking about. So you got the compiler and the execution environment, the JRE, bundled in a Java development kit. Now, these kits come in versions, and then there are vendors that provide implementations of it. Now, just stick with the Oracle one, I guess, and pick whichever version. So 19 should be fine. and you can download it. And the beauty of IntelliJ is it would just take care of downloading it for you without you really having to worry about anything. I'm just gonna create. So the first step that I would like you to do is to erase everything that is created. And where you see main, I want you to, let me move my picture. Where you see main, just go and choose refactor, rename, and write hello world. And notice the H is capital and the W is capital. And then refactor that. Go back to Firefox and copy the program it's written for us. And go back to IntelliJ, paste it. And then you'll notice that IntelliJ has play buttons that show up. And you may want to just click on any of them. Now we're waiting here for the program to be compiled using the Java compiler and then run. And we see the result of running the program using the JRE or on top of the JRE. So continuing here, what we have right now is the JDK and the IDE being glued together within the IDE, and we have copied the source code that ChatGPT has given us and executed it and got the result of the execution in the run tool window. That's all pretty cool. And it's our first program executed. Now, the JDK contains the necessary tools to develop and run the Java program. And the JDK is actually here. If you copy this and you go and see, have a look at the JDK, that's our JDK. Okay. The content, home, bin, and these are the necessary tools that it's talking about here. Sorry. The necessary tools to develop and run Java programs. The IDE provides the environment for writing, testing, debugging code, and I would say it would provide integration with the JDK so that you don't have to worry about any command line tools or anything. You just click, like we did, click a play button from the graphical user interface and everything happens for you automatically. So, writing your first program. Let's write our first program. It's called Hello World. Open your preferred IDE and create a new Java project, create a new class and name it Hello World. And then once you paste that in, you save it and you run the program and you should see Hello World printed like we saw here. Okay, so basic syntax. Let's take a closer look at the basic syntax of Hello World program we just wrote. The public keyword is an access modifier that allows other classes to access this class. In Java, there are 4 access modifiers: public, private, protected, default. It's a bit advanced for a beginner, so let's just forget about this one here. The class keyword is used to define a new class. All right, so public is saying that this class that is called Hello World is public and can be accessed from other classes. Okay, whatever that means. And now we have those parentheses, which indicate that this is the body of the class. This is the name of the class. And these mark the beginning of the class and the end of the class. Now, let's go back to here. The main method is the entry point to the program. Now, a method or a function is it's basically the same thing, method function in the Java context. It is the set of instructions that you can combine into one piece of functionality and you can give it a name. So this is the main function or the main method, the main entry point to the program. And right here, I'm saying hello world, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've combined a bunch of statements into one function, and it's a special function that the JRE is looking for to execute your program. And as you can see, I've just copied and pasted and added the numbers in there, and it seems to be printing what we are telling it to print, which makes sense. And we're telling it to print by saying system.out.println. Now, what does this mean? What the heck does this mean? What does let's say if it has a good answer. So system.add.println is a method in Java. Method, like we said, is just basically a bunch of instructions combined together in a single place where they can be executed as a block and given a name. Okay, so a method to print is a method that is used to print out to the console. The console being this place. This place is called the console. The system class is part of the core Java libraries. Remember when we said the JDK consists of the compiler and the set of the libraries and whatnot that come with the Java language. So system being part of the standard Java library, and out being a field within that library, and println being a method within that field that is essentially a class. What does that mean? Too advanced for now. As a beginner, you may just memorize system.out.println for now is the way you can print things to the console. So it refers to the standard output stream. Okay, that's too advanced. Okay, so it's saying here that whenever you print something, it's going to add a new line after. So that's interesting. There's another function called print without line. Let's see the difference. If you execute print, and then println, what happens is it executes hello world 1, and there's no new line just right after hello world 2, 3, 4, and then after 4, there is a new line that is at the end of 4, of statement number 4, and then number 5 comes on a new line. So if I change this to len, we're going to see a new line inserted after the number 3. Let's verify that. Run again. It's parsing. Cool. So after number 3, we have a new line. Now, what if I said system.out.print, but instead of line, I put this character? What's going to happen after hello world 2? After 2, there's a new line. That's good. If I copy this and put it here as well, let's see what's going to happen. They're back, each one on its own line. All right, so let's ask it about the mysterious \n that I've just used between double quotations. What is in a Java print statement? So the sequence is a special character that represents a new line. It is often used in combination with system.out.println, the statement that we just used for printing a line to the console, to print out on multiple lines. For example, the following code, hello world. So because we're using len, we're seeing that they're being printed on different lines, since we are printing hello and then comma and then a new line world. All right, so that's the output. We can actually take it and verify that. Perfect. All right, so let's scroll and see the other example it gave us and try and execute that. Yeah, you want to be careful not to erase these guys. So example number 2, we're expecting the same output really, but achieved with one statement rather than 2, with the \n indicating that there's a new line that is going to be printed right here. Now, what if we replace that with t? Now that's, instead of a new line, a tab. Let's have a look. There you go. Now, the IDE is highlighting it with a sort of like gray dash. It isn't really a dash. It's, if you actually copy the text and go to a plain text editor, you don't see the dash. So executing this is equivalent to executing both. Print, and then a new line after the whatever you wanted to print earlier. So can we make it a bit simpler? Yes, we can. We can do something called string concatenation. So this is a string and this is a string, and we combine them together into one string. And that should put a new line after the first statement. So if we do this as well, we can continue using the print with the new line combined with it and see everything, all the statements being on its own line. Now, what can we do even more is combine them in the same string. Now, these are quotations, double quotations. So what we have between the double quotations is called a string. All right. And a string basically is just a bunch of text. So let's see how this is going to be executed. We're getting the same result. So it turns out when you combine those two strings together, well, you don't have to use the plus between the two. You can just have one string with the hello world and the escape character with n indicating new line. Going back to Firefox now, we have a couple more points in this chapter. So string args, which you might have seen here, is basically, if you think about your program as a program that you can invoke through the command line, then you can pass what we call arguments to it. And those arguments will be received by your main method through this parameter that's a string array of arguments. So it's quite an advanced topic for a beginner. I wouldn't worry about it too much. And the last thing is it's telling us that system.out.println hello world is a statement that prints hello world to the console. And that's it for chapter 1. And in the next chapter, we'll cover control statements and loops. I can just say, can you generate for me the next chapter, please? Sure, here's an example of our two control statements and loops. Java control statements are used to control the flow of the program. Control statements allow us to make decisions and execute code repeatedly. In this chapter, we'll cover the following: decision-making statements, looping statements, break and continue statements, decision-making statements. And it's giving us examples. That's pretty nice. So, decision-making statements. Statements allow us to execute different blocks of code based on certain conditions. Java has 4 types of decision-making statements. We have if else, and nested if else, and then switch. So the if statement is pretty simple. Let's go and execute that now. All right. So what we're looking at here is we're defining a variable, and that variable is of type integer, and it's called x, and its value is 10. And what we're saying is if 10, which is the value of x, when you use the variable in an expression, so this is an expression, and when you use it in an expression, its value gets substituted in its place. So the value of x here is 10. So what we're saying here, if 10 is greater than 5, which is the case, then I would like it to execute what's in this block. And we could say else is not greater than 5. So what we're saying here is if x, which is 10, is greater than 5, then say to me x is greater than 5. And if it's not, then say to me in the console, it's not greater than. And if you execute that, you're going to get this statement printed. All right. So how about we make it a bit more interesting and say, do a bit of string concatenation again, but this time we're going to do a concatenation, not with another string like we did earlier. No, we're going to concatenate with a number, which is in this case 10. So let's run that again. It's going to say 10 is greater than 5. If we change 10 to 1 and run this again, we're expecting this to be executed since 1 will evaluate to not greater than 5, which would be less than 5. And this gets executed. And I'm guessing this is what it had prepared for us for the second case, which is the if else. So we've covered that already. Now the third one is the if else statement allows us to test multiple conditions. So let's see what they have generated for us here. So x is 10, y is 5, and you're saying if 10 is greater than 5, then do what's in this block. So 10 is obviously greater than 5. So we're going to end up in this block executing this code. Y is 5, and we're saying if y is greater than 2, then we're going to print x is greater than 5, as we've ensured here, and y is greater than 2, as we've ensured here. So let's execute that and see if this it should be printed, obviously, given those values. So that's pretty straightforward. And the switch statements, let's copy that. So we have the variable day, and it's an integer that can hold a number, any number really. But what we're saying here is if the number it holds is 1, then it's a Monday. If it's 2, then it's a Tuesday. 3, Wednesday. 4, Thursday. 5, Friday. And default is weekend. Well, let's see. I wouldn't really agree with this program very much. If the day held the number 20, it'd still print weekend. So never mind. I guess what we're trying to do here is we're looking at the value of the day, and then we're saying switch based on the value of the day. And if you find the value to be 1, execute this and then break the execution. If you find the value to be 2, execute this and break the execution, which means just basically break out of this block and go to the next thing, which can be, by the way, sout is a nice handy shortcut for generating in IntelliJ this print statement. You can put in here the end. So the value we've picked here is 4, and so this case will be executed and Thursday will be printed, and then since it's a print line, a new line will be added, and then the end would be executed, and then a new line would be added after. Actually, you see that new line before this and this line? If I just print with no len and execute that, that line would disappear. So even for the last statement, you're still printing a new line before the process finished with whatever that means. Doesn't matter. Exit codes is a Unix thing, and you shouldn't worry about it for a Java course. Okay, so let's change the value to 6. Well, let's change it to 1. So that should print Monday. And if we switch it, and I guess the point is numbers 6 and 7 would be the weekend. So 6, it would print weekend. Now, if I may modify this program, because I don't think this program is correct. I would like to modify the behavior in such way. And so for number 6, it's Saturday. For number 7, it's Sunday. And I'll get to default in a second. Default would be value is not correct. See, this is one of the problems when you are using ChatGPT. You can't trust everything that it spits out. Okay, so right here, we are supplying the number 6 and we got Saturday. If we supply the number 7, we'll get Sunday. Now, the default part of it is optional, and it's meant to say if you don't have a number here that matches any of those cases, then please use the default. Now, you can get rid of the default. There's no problem with that. The code will just execute fine. I'd like to keep it and give the value of, I don't know, -1. And then see what's going to happen. Value is not correct. So it went to, because it checked all of these cases and none of them worked, so it went to the default. Same if you give value like, 10, it would have the same problem. Value is not correct. So going back to Firefox, looping statements. Let's get rid of those and have a look at this loop. So it's pretty simple. It's saying I have an integer whose value is 0, and I would like to while a condition of the current value of I being less than 5, I would like to print I, which is starting from 0, and then I plus plus. So let's execute that. See what's going to happen. So that's interesting. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so how did we end up with this output executing this program? Let's break it down. So first thing you want to ignore is these. You want to focus your attention on these lines. All right, so what we have here in the first line is an integer that we're defining that is named I. I is the name of the integer, and the initial value is 0. And what we're saying is, while I, which currently has the value of 0, is less than 5. So that's a condition, okay? And while that condition is true, then we're going to execute what's between those two curly brackets, which is to print the current value of I. And then this means increase the value of I by 1. So this means I equals I plus 1. So if I's value is 0, then add 1 to it, then store it in I, so I becomes 1. Okay? All right. So we evaluate the condition. While the value of I is 0, then certainly 0 less than 5 is true. So we go in and we execute the system. Sorry, let me just erase those for now. We execute the system.out.print I, which is going to print the current value of I, 0, what we see here. All right. Now we're going to say I plus plus here, which, like I said, means that we're going to increase the value of I from 0 to 1. And we hit the end of the block, and then that marks the end of the first iteration. So this is iteration 1, and in iteration 1 we printed 0. We printed 0 right here. Now let's see iteration 2. Now, before we do iteration 2, we need to come back to the condition, reevaluate it, and see if it still holds. Then we're going to do iteration 2. If it doesn't hold, we're going to quit. So right now, the value of I has been updated to 1 thanks to this increment statement that's been executed in iteration 1. So is 1 less than 5? The answer is true, yes, which means the condition here is true, which means system.out.println I will be executed. So since the last statement was println I and I was 0, we printed 0 and then we printed a new line. And now we're here and we're going to print the new value of I, which is 1. And then we're going to print a new line. And then the cursor will move here. So after we printed number 1 here, we're going to increase the value of I by 1. So I, which is currently 1 plus 1, will be 2. So the new value of I will be 2. And then that's iteration 3. So we're going to have to, before we do iteration number 3, evaluate whether the condition still holds or not. So what we're going to say, the current value of I is 2, thanks to the increment statement in iteration number 2. That made it 2. And now we're saying, is 2 less than 5? And the answer is yes, it's less than 5. So we're going to go in, we're going to print 2 here again, execute the print statement, and then we're going to increment it, and the value will be 3. And then iteration 4. Now for iteration number 4, the value of I currently is 3. So we're going to have to evaluate the condition and say, is 3 less than 5? The answer is yes. We're going to print 3. We're going to increase the value of I to 4. We get to iteration 5. And in iteration 5, the value of I is 4. Is 4 less than 5? And the condition still holds. We go in and we print 4. And then we say I equals I plus 1, which makes the value of I 5. And then we say, is the condition still true? Is 5 less than 5? And the answer is no. And then we don't execute these statements. And then the program ends. And that's why we stop printing at 4. So one cool way of following the flow of a program is to use the debug button and to set a breakpoint. So I'm going to set these breakpoints. I'm going to hit debug. And then what happens is, while the program is being executed, the program stops at these debug points whenever they're hit. So for this side, it is the, what is this? All right, so that's your threads and the call stack. Never mind that. We're not interested in that. Now, keep your eyes on the evaluation side, like the variables side. So right now, we're going to step in using F8. And there you see, there is a variable being created or has been created called I with a value of 0. And then right here, we're going to step in. And what we saw was the execution of this condition. If you copy that and paste it here, and you hit enter, that evaluates to true. So in this box, you can put anything. So I can just put, I don't know, 1 greater than 2. Is 1 greater than 2? That's false. Is 1 less than 2? Then that's true. And you get the point. If I put 1, it's going to evaluate to 1. If I put a string, hello, it's going to evaluate to a string. If I put a string and concatenate it with another string, it's going to evaluate to that. If I put a new line in there, it evaluated to a new line kind of in the middle. So you get the point. It's a nice way of learning how to code and getting instant feedback. All right, so back to the condition. We're in iteration number 1. The condition holds true. The value of I is 0. And if I may drag this here so that you have a look while you're observing the variables, what is being printed on the screen. So I'm going to F8, and then the first thing that is supposed to be printed, which is this 0, has been printed. And then I++ will increase the value of I to 1. And now we're evaluating the condition again. And the condition is simply, is I less than 5, which is true. So if you hit F8, that's going to evaluate to true. It's going to step in the block of code that we have for the while. And we're going to print the value of I right now, which is 1. And then we're going to I++. So the value will go from 1 to 2. And then we're going to evaluate, is 2 less than 5? Yes. We're going to print 2. And then we're going to increase the value of I to 3. We're going to say, is 3 less than 5? Yes. Print 3. Increase. Is 4 less than 5? Yes. Print 4. Increase. Is 5 less than 5? No. And notice that the last value of I is 5. And then the last number was printed is 4. So if I take out this print statement from here and put it here, what would be printed? I would say the number 5. But why? See in a second. The number 5 has been printed. Reason why a number 5 has been printed is because if you recall, while we're printing here within the loop, the last number was printed was 4. And then we increased i's value from 4 to 5. And then we said 5 is not equal to 5 and we'll leave. So the value of I right here is 5. So if I am to have a print statement of I here, it's going to print the value 5. So that's looping in Java explained very, very, very briefly. All right, now for the rest of those, I believe that you can do them yourself. Feel free to ask ChatGPT any questions that you have. I'm just going to ask it, can you generate for me the next chapter, please? All right, sure. So chapter number 3, object-oriented programming concepts. Object-oriented programming is a programming paradigm. It is based on the concept of objects. In Java, everything is an object, and the key principle of OOP are encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. This chapter, we will cover the following topics: introduction, classes and objects, methods, constructors, access modifiers, inheritance, polymorphism, introduction to OOP. So it's telling you to define a class, person, and then it's going to make an instance of that class, and then define the name, which is a string, and the integer, which is age, the person's age. And let's try that. So we're going to go in IntelliJ, and in source, I'm going to go create a new Java class. I'm going to call it person. I'm going to paste the code they've given me. And then right here, I'm going to say person equals new person. And then that person dot age equals, let's say, 25. And person dot name equals Peter, for instance. And I'm going to say s out person dot age person dot name, and I'm going to do a bunch of concatenation here. So the person we are talking about here is, and then you're given the name, and then you're saying, and his age is, and then person dot age, and let's see what it's going to print. So the person we're talking about here is Peter, and his age is 25. So a person is the template, and then Peter or John or whoever would be an instance of that template. Now, we can create methods. So let's follow along. Say hello. So let's add this method to the person class. Say hello. Hello, my name is, and then your referencing name. So if we remove that and you're saying person dot say hello and run that, that should print hello, my name is, and then you put in the name, which is Peter. And all right, yeah, it's executing that. Constructors, and it's the same thing, but then it's defining what we call constructor. A constructor is a nice and handy way to pass parameters to this object that you're creating from this template that's called person, and the parameters be name and age. So instead of me going and saying person, new person, and then given the name and then the age, I could just give it the name, which is Peter, through the constructor, and then the age 25. And then let me modify this say hello. And I am years old, and hit enter. So now we've reduced our code a bit here. And let me just say right here, we have a class and we are being the users of this class. And we're using a method inside called say hello. All right, so far so good. Access modifiers. We have things like public, private, and protected access modifiers. Failed to generate the rest, unfortunately. So can you regenerate the chapter starting from the access modifiers bit? All right, so it's continuing now from the access modifiers part. And now it's talking about inheritance. So it's giving you an example of a public class animal, and then a dog, which is a type of animal. So it extends or inherits from an animal. Now every animal eats. So what we're saying here, let me copy that into IntelliJ. All right. I'm going to create another class called dog. And then what we're saying is we have an animal, it's a class, and an animal can eat. And then, if you create an instance of animal, you could say animal.eat, and then that is going to print I am eating. Let's wait for that. Yep. Let's get rid of the person as well, just to clean things up. And then a dog is a kind of animal and it can bark. Not every animal can bark. So it doesn't make sense to have the bark function inside the animal, but it definitely makes sense for a dog. So let's create a dog object. So dog equals new dog. And then you're going to say dog dot bark. And then that's going to print I am barking. Or woof, whatever that was. Yeah. And notice that you could also say dog dot eat, but we didn't define eat here. We defined it in animal, but you see we're inheriting animal by using the keyword extends. And therefore a dog now gets to eat because it's an animal. Now you get rid of the inheritance by removing those two words, and you're going to get an error here saying that a dog can't eat because a dog doesn't have the eat method in it. So you put that back in, and then a dog can eat. Thank God for that. And yeah. All right, so that's it for this chapter. I mean, look, you can go in depth and ask as many questions as you like. I'm just here to walk you through very quickly the basic concepts of Java and show you how you can use the tool to actually educate you on a language that you don't know anything about. So, can you generate the next chapter for me, please? I'm polite. I keep saying please. So we did talk about strings, but we didn't talk yet about arrays. So let's see what it has in store for us. All right. Arrays and strings are two important data types in Java. An array is a collection of elements of the same data type. Like I said before at the beginning of the video, if you have a list of the students that are in a class, well, they're all related to each other because they're in the same class, and they're all of the same data type, which is list of names, let's say a list of strings. So they're all of the same data type and they all are related to each other. A string is a sequence of characters. In this chapter, we'll cover the following topics: introduction to arrays and strings, declaring and initializing arrays, accessing and modifying arrays elements, array length and multidimensional arrays, string class and its methods, string buffer and string builder classes, and introduction to arrays and strings. Well, did that mistake for the second time now. In any case, I think this is an advanced topic. I mean, string buffer and string builder, the difference between both is quite advanced. But in any case, let's see. An array is a collection of elements of the same data type. Arrays are useful for storing and manipulating a large number of similar elements. A string is a sequence of characters. Strings are used for representing text and other data that is made up of characters. We talked about strings before. I don't feel that we should continue talking. The way you would define an array is you provide the data type, which in this example is an integer, and then you give it those, I don't know what they're called, brackets, I guess, and then numbers, which is the name of the array. So let's use this example here. So we're done with that. Let's close these out. So you got yourself an array here that's called numbers, and you can print out the numbers this way. I don't know. Does that even work? We'll see. No, it doesn't, because so it's printing this weird number, and I don't know what this is. Is it a memory location? Doesn't matter. What you want is to print 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? So what you can do is use these brackets and say 0. And when you hit play, you're printing the element at the location 0. And in programming, you start counting from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, rather than beginning from 1. So it's printed 1. If you choose location 4, which is here, it's going to print 5. All right, let's make these 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Print again, that's going to print 50, right? Now I want to create a while loop. So I'm going to go I equals 0. And then I'll say while I is less than 5. And inside that while, I'm going to print numbers of I. Let's see how that's going to go. Wow, that's a mistake. And that's what we call in programming an infinite loop. An infinite loop is a loop that keeps looping forever. And the reason why this loop that we just created loops forever is because we forgot to increment. We forgot to say I++. So when you begin with 0 and then you do your first iteration, you're meant to increase the value of I to I++, or whatever increment you would like to do, so that in some iteration in the future, when you're evaluating the loop condition, you're going to evaluate it to false, and then you're going to break out of the loop. Now, what we have here is just a print statement that's just going to keep printing the first element forever. So let's fix that now. I'm going to say I++. Let's try this now. All right, so what happened? I didn't get rid of this statement. So let me get rid of it and run again. So it's printed all the elements that are in the array. All right, so what happened? The first time, or the first iteration, the value of I was 0. So we accessed numbers of 0, which is 10. We increased the value to 1, and then we did another iteration, and then we accessed 20, 30, 40, 50. And then that's it. So what if I increase the value? In other words, what if I try to access element numbers of 5, which doesn't exist? We have numbers of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't have numbers of 5. If I do that, we're going to have an exception that we're going to look at the next chapter. And that's what I meant by you're trying to do something. You're trying to access an element that is not existing. So it's saying exception thread main, index 5, out of bounds for length 5. All right, so we could just fix it by saying 60. That's going to print the next one just fine, no problems. Or we can put this back to 5. And that should also solve the problem. Let's wait for it to execute. Yeah. All right. So it's explaining here how you can access. Oh, since we're on the topic, say I want to change the values here. So I can take this for loop, duplicate it, and this while loop prints out the elements, and then instead of printing out here, I'm going to say numbers of I equals numbers of I plus 1. And that's going to update every value in this array and add 1 to it. So let's execute. Actually, let's not execute. One thing that I did wrong is I duplicated the variable. So I can just do this and get rid of the problem. Executing again, and we see 11, 21, 31, 41, 51. So that's accessing the value and modifying the value as well. Array name.length, you can say sout numbers.length, and that would basically tell us what is the length of this particular array. And since we're getting 5, which is essentially the number here, we can just replace that number with array.length. And we can always ensure in this case that we are iterating over the right amount of elements, and we're not going to get array out of bound exception. So even if we get rid of all the elements here, we hit run, nothing's going to blow up because, well, the length is 1. We start with 0. 0 is less than 1. We do one iteration, and then the next iteration, 1 is not less than 1, and then we break. All right, the 2D array, you can study that yourself, I guess. Okay, string class and its methods. The same thing you can do with strings. So you can do stuff like this. The length, I think you do that. So that's a method that you can execute. And then you can say sout length, and that's going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. If my counting is correct, we're going to have the number 13 printed here. That's correct. All right, so it stopped generating. Can you generate the chapter from till the end of it? All right, so it's repeating the same introduction at the beginning of the chapter, and then hopefully, yeah, it's continuing. Yeah, so you can take the length function and play with it, or the character at. So let's say character at 0 is h. So if we say str dot character at, we say 0, and we print that, that's going to print h. We say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Character at 4 should be O, which is the 5th character in the string. So you get the point. Substring, you can get a begin index to an end index, like slice it. Here's an example. I don't have to type things myself. So the length of this returns for 13, like we saw before, returns h, the character at 0. The substring from 0 to 5 returns hello. And notice that 0 is the starting index, and 5 would be not included. So actually, the character at index 5 is this. So if we got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So number 5 would be this, is not included in this substring. All right. Now the upper, so if we print this substring, so I could show you. That's a comment here, by the way. And here it returned hello. And you can do something like this to uppercase. And that's going to turn the string into an uppercase string. String buffer and string builder. If you want to have a string built from little pieces like hello world, then you can, well, I need to actually print it. So what it's doing here is it's adding hello and adding world. I guess it's deleting starting index 5 and then index 6 and stopping at index 7 not being included. So if you look at the original string, it would have looked something like hello, oh, sorry, world. And that would have been index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it deleted 5 and 6 and it stopped at 7. So that's what this delete is for. So if we make that 8, we're going to delete the W as well. So let's try that. I'm going to end up with hello world, which doesn't make sense. Generate Power 5 exception handling. Exception handling used to handle errors and unexpected events in a program. So the way it works is you use a try catch block and a finally block, and then any exception being thrown, you can actually catch that exception and handle it. And here it's saying so it's taking the same example, well, two examples, the null pointer exception and the array out of bound exception. And it's showing you the syntax of it and then the finally block. So basically, if you have a bit of code that is risky, you're trying to access an element that doesn't exist in an array, then that's going to blow up. And then you're going to be sent to this block to execute print an error statement that you couldn't access that element. And then finally is optional, just like we saw in switch, default block was optional. And finally, you could execute any code you want. So even if your code that you execute here ends up not throwing any exception and you don't end up coming here, well, this will be executed in any case. It is not giving us an example. So let me give you an example myself. Okay, going back a bit to the previous example here. Yeah. So with this array here, I'm going to try to S out the numbers. Element number 6, which we know doesn't exist. I'm gonna be printed in all cases. And here, the element you are trying to access does not exist. We run it. And we say that the element that you are trying to access does not exist. And I'm gonna be printed in all cases. So if we make that an element that you can actually access, which is element number 20, then you're going to print that element and then you're going to print that statement, and you'll notice that this statement will not be printed because no exception happened. So there's no need to catch anything. And that's the story of exceptions. All right, that's it for this video. I hope you found it helpful and you learned something. Now notice that I already know Java. I work with it every day. So I was able to fly through the tutorial that was designed for 5 hours in just 1 hour. However, it might not be the case for you. So feel free to keep experimenting, asking all the questions that you want to ChatGPT. And do not always trust the answer that it gives you. Do your research as well. Use Google, use the compiler first and foremost, because the compiler will give you the true answer, whether the code that you're trying to execute will do or will not do what you're trying to achieve. Thank you for watching. If you like this video and you would like to see more, consider subscribing. It's really difficult to do tutorials in my second language, so supporting my channel really makes it all worth it. Thank you very much, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.